Well, hello everyone, and welcome back. So, what's on tap for today? We're continuing our series on the Politicon debates. This time it's part 3 of Cenk Uygur and Ben Shapiro at the Politicon debates. Part 3, we're going to get to that in the next few seconds, but before we do so, we just want to let you know you're watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I'm your guest host for today. My name is Dr. Nasir. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, like, share, and follow us. Comment below. Let us know what you think. Let's get to the debate between Cenk and Ben.
Taxes. Do you think we'll see tax reform in the next few months here?
Okay, so let me try to address all that in your question as well. So just real quick, look guys, I said it however many questions ago. Of course you have to find the right balance on all of these issues, including taxes. So I never said there's no end to how much you can
I'm just asking why, though.
Yeah, so this leads to, no wait a minute, this leads to big government versus small government. You're asking me what the ideal tax rate is, and then you did a straw man there for a second and said it should be 100%. I never said that.
No,
in fact, I said...
No, you said the economy...
Let me understand
You said the economy grew faster when the top marginal tax rate was 91%. So I'm asking you, why shouldn't the top tax rate or all tax rates be 91%? You seem to be identifying a higher rate of growth with higher taxation. So I'm asking you, on principle, you keep talking about the glories of a mixed economy. So now tell me about the glories of capital. I've heard about the glories of high tax rates. I've heard about the glories of government-provided health care. Now tell me some of the glories of actual capitalism, which is the basis for all the things you're talking. Tell me why it's good.
Right. So now, look, I use the example of the 91% and 70% to give you a sense of that I was surprised and you'd be surprised to find out that our economy was booming in those times. That's not to say that that is the right tax rate for us today. And so the exercise of finding the right tax rate is, guys, try to follow along, okay? It's called logic.
The crowd does not like the Cenk, the Cenk master. They don't like the Cenk, because they think the Cenk is pulling their Cenk. That's what's going on here. Anyway, let's continue.
So it would be preposterous to set the tax rate at 0. It would be preposterous to set it at 100%. So what we have to do as a society is figure out where we can maximize the most amount of good for the country.
Should it be closer to 0 or closer to 100?
Government, but not too much away from us. So, for example, the reason why when taxes are higher, it winds up being better for the economy is because it recirculates the money. So if you give it to the rich, this is hilarious. If you're uneducated, please at least don't make it obvious.
Oh, Cenk, he's losing it here, folks. I mean, first, the crowd's against him. I don't know, he's jibber-jabbering. He's doing this circular, I don't know what he's trying to get at in terms of, circulation of money. Circulation of money. Let's hear his circulation of money theory. But the crowd is not having any part of it. And he's going after the crowd, which is not the thing that you want to do, folks.
This is the most interesting conversation on taxes I've heard.
If you don't know the concept of recirculation of money, then go look it up. And so the way that it works is that when the middle class has more money, disposable income, they spend it. Why? Because they're not living in the lap of luxury. They're not saving it for their yacht. So they need to buy food for their family. They need education for their family. So they spend it and it goes back into the economy. If you just give it in supply side economics to the rich and hope that it trickles down on us eventually decades later, what they wind up doing with it is something that is logical. They save it.
Wherever your business needs to show up,
for their family, so they spend it and it goes back into the economy. If you just give it in supply side economics to the rich and hope that it trickles down on us eventually decades later, what they wind up doing with it is something that is logical. They save it. But that means it does not recirculate in the economy. And that is why when you have lower taxes, ironically, the economy does worse. But of course it's a balancing act.
Okay, so Now you're making a strong case for Keynesian economics, which is totally fine, obviously. The problem with Keynesian economics is that it doesn't even work in theory because, again, once you go to the logical extreme, which is remove all of the money from the rich people who are saving all their money and give it to all the poor people to buy hamburgers, that doesn't help the economy or spur the economy. What spurs the economy is a higher level...
Right.
What spurs the economy is...
Looks like right there that all the people that like Cenk the Cenk, right? They were booing Ben, and he's making some sense here, but let's continue.
The creation of new products and services, and that is only going to be done by people who have expendable capital to actually invest in the new products and services that we all enjoy. This is what creates economic growth. It's also worth noting that this myth that spending is inherently better for an economy than saving, that's only true if you're talking about somebody who's actually taking the cash and just shoving it into their mattress. Banks are in the business of lending. When they take the money in, they don't just stick it in Al Gore's fake lockbox. They actually lend the money back out to people to actually create new businesses and new products. You had an investor, right? When you started TYT, you were given $4 million by Buddy Romer to start TYT. That's great. That's the way business should work, right? But that money it didn't come from a bunch of poor people buying hamburgers. It came from a very, very wealthy guy who gave you money to create a business a lot of people want to patronize. If you want better products and better services, you need more investment in the products and services. The basic name, trickle-down economics.
They love the answer.
The basic name trickle-down economics is not something that any conservative even proposed. It's a leftist revision of what economics actually is, because you're not giving me the money. It was my money in the first place, created through voluntary transactions that I had with others. I've not stolen money from anyone, neither have you. And the idea that money has to be forcibly taken from you and handed to somebody at the bottom end of the economic spectrum to somehow jog the economy, that may jog McDonald's, but is not going to jog all of the creation of the products and services that make all of our lives much better today than they were 30 years ago in terms of the stuff we have access to.
Wow, 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 wow. Ben just hit it right on the head. Point, score, takedown, Ben Shapiro. Why? Because all Cenk did was just talking about, oh, you know what? If the rich have the money, they're saving it for their yachts, okay? It's not being recirculated because they're saving it. But you know what? The poor people, if you give it to them, they're poor. They're going to spend it because they need it for food and for water and for the kids' education and for health insurance and for all these things. It's called recirculation of money. Oh, you don't understand it? You guys are a bunch of retards. Go look it up. I mean, and as Ben said, Keynesian economics doesn't even work in theory, let alone in reality. And this whole thing about trickle-down economics, it's just, again, a left-wing talking point. Has nothing to do with, economics or the economy. It's just something they coined to say, oh, trickle-down economics from the Reagan era. All Ben is saying is that goods and services are what drive everything in the economy. And you know what? To take money, and you know what? Like he said, to take money from me and give it to the poor or, down on the economic ladder at the lower rungs, if you think that's going to stimulate the economy, that's not what does it. So points, takedown, Ben Shapiro, at least up till now. Let's continue.
Cenk, I'll let you respond to that briefly, and then we'll switch topic.
Yeah. So I'll try to answer that as briefly as I can, and I'll go on to your questions. So when you talk about, hey, the banks they're not going to just keep the money, they're going to put it out and lend it to people, unless they decided to do their own investments, which is what they did because we repealed Glass-Steagall. So it's not as simple as, oh, I have money, so then I will now utilize it or I'll lend it out. So that is way oversimplistic. Speaking of oversimplistic, to say that, oh, well, they'll go buy hamburgers with it, come on.
You were the one who said
so
food.
The middle class is struggling right now. And we've turned this into a Walmart economy where people are getting $7.25. And that if you're getting around 10...
I would have said, and one of the things I would say, if the middle class is really struggling right now and being absolutely crushed, after 8 years of Obama, that's what you're going with right now, Cenk? That the middle class is struggling, is being crushed? Oh, you're not making your point very well here, Cenk.
I think that's about $15,000 a year. So that is serious pain and difficulties. So if you give those people money, it's not like, I just want to go get a hamburger.
No, they eat.
Desperately need that money, and they will spend it all back into the economy. So that's an economic fact. And so, and Ben, for the 88th time, we have to find a balance where you have provided an incentive for people to save and invest, and you have provided an incentive for people to be able to put money back into the economy and to be able to live. And taxes is not stealing from you. So you're right, I run a business. So in order for my employees to get to my company, you know what they have to do? They have to drive on roads. Okay, so it's not stealing from me to build that road. That helps my business. They had to go to school. The fact that they went to public schools allows them to work for me. All these things are things that I benefit from. I didn't build that company by myself. Every single person that works there helped me to build that company. And that's what it means to work together.
Okay,
So to answer Steve's question finally, look, what is this Congress going to do on tax reform? And Ben and I disagree on this too, because we just talked about it a second ago. And this is just political prognostication, but I think that the Republicans will definitely pass tax reform. And the reason I say that is because the Republican Party at this point is completely dependent on their donors. And by the way, don't get me wrong, the Democratic Party is also largely dependent on their donors. I think the Republicans are a tiny bit more corrupt. But so I think that their donors are going to demand those tax cuts. And if I am right, and we'll all see this, because it's something that's going to happen later, not something that has happened, they will do everything. They will move mountains to make sure that those rich donors and corporations will get their tax cuts.
okay. So this is an interesting case where I say to Cenk's prognostication from his mouth to God's ears, and he says about mine from my mouth to God's ears, because I don't think they're going to pass anything, because I think that there's a high level incompetence inside the Republican caucus, and it's pretty fractious. But I do want to go back to a couple of points, because you actually hit on some major thematic points. You talked about roads and the fact that we need roads in order to get to work. This is a point Elizabeth Warren made, and obviously a point that President Obama made at the time. I don't think anyone argues that we don't need roads to get to work. The problem is that when you're talking about roads as a percentage of the budget, we are talking about a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of the federal budget and of the state budget and even of the local budget. So the idea that you're justifying massive tax rates on corporations in order to pay for roads is just intellectually dishonest. It's a tiny, the stuff that we agree on, that government should spend on, is a tiny percentage of spending, right? It's all the other stuff that we disagree on. As far as the idea that
Points scored right there for Ben. Cenk the Cenk came out and basically said, you didn't build that. You didn't build that public school. You didn't build those roads. You didn't do any of that. It was the government that did that. It was our money that was confiscated, some would say legally or illegally, to the IRS, and they spent on that. Ben comes right back and says, intellectually dishonest. Why? Because the percentage that's being utilized for building those roads, for doing those things that you're talking about at all levels, federal, state, local, municipalities, townships, whatever, it is such a small amount of their budget. Does that justify a high tax rate? Come on now. That's exactly what he's saying. Point for Ben again.
somehow being, dismissive toward people who are buying hamburgers. I'm not. I'm saying the people who are poor need to buy hamburgers to feed their children. They don't have the money to invest in building an iPhone because when you're just trying to get by and you are living in a Walmart subsistence economy, you're using that money to buy the products and services you need to get by. That does not create new products and services that become cheaper over time through competition. You need somebody to make those investments. You said this about Glass-Steagall, for example. You said the banks, they might make their own investments. In what? In what? They're not investing in themselves. I mean, they have to take that money and then they have to use it to invest in something else. Places like Apple, some that fail and some that succeed. This idea that banks are somehow evils is just not the case unless you are talking about them working in Congress. Here you and I agree, working in congruity with a Congress and with a legislature that is attempting to give them kickbacks. Both you and I agree on this. So, and finally, as far as the idea that Republicans pass tax cuts because they're beholden to their donors, okay, and Democrats pass tax increases because the unions give them hundreds of millions of dollars every year, and I don't see Democrats complain about this.
Oh, Wow. Point scored, takedown on Ben Shapiro. You heard it right there. Talking about the banks, just like Cenk came out and said, you know what? Banks, they just, they lend. Okay, fine, I'll cede that point. But they do their own investing too. Yeah, they're investing in what? Just like Ben said, they're investing in the same things that other people are investing, but they're obviously investing millions and millions of dollars. They have the ability to do that with companies, with startups, with whatever it is. Some of their investments will do well, some won't. Point to Ben. I mean, it's just unbelievable here. And I'm just saying that in this here part 3, Ben really scored some major points because all Cenk was basically doing was, showing a supposed problem of some kind or a perception of some kind, and then basically saying, oh, it's their fault. They're the ones that are doing it. But he didn't give any solutions or anything. And then when it was Ben's turn to rebut, you know what happened? He basically took it point by point and said, hey, you said this thing about the banks. You said this thing about them lending the money out. Well, guess what? Everything you said is intellectually dishonest. And so I would say part 3 goes to Ben Shapiro. Folks, we appreciate you taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I've been your guest host. My name is Dr. Nasir. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, like, share, and follow us. Comment down below. Let us know you think in part 3, round 3 of the Politicon debates between Ben Shapiro and Cenk the Cenk Uygur. Leave you with my final thoughts, which is, when you're right, you're right. And when you're left, you're wrong. See you again next time, folks. Take care and stay safe.